Hey there, Greg here. I want to thank you for signing up to watch this video. What I'm going to be doing here in this next 20-30 minutes or so is teaching really the 3 steps to moderation. This is the 3-step process that I use in my one-on-one coaching with my clients to enable them to make pretty drastic reductions in how much they drink, and more than that, to feel in control with their drinking. I'm going to teach these 3 steps in a way that's very practical, it's very actionable, in a way that you could put these into practice tonight to start understanding yourself better, understanding kind of the interaction of you and drinking in a way that's new, and from those kind of insights, start to make some different decisions, to think about alcohol differently in a way that gives you some control and lets you make decisions. But I'm also going to talk about these 3 steps in the context of kind of how they fit in with my coaching solution. Because my expectation is there are some people watching this that are looking for more than just tips that they can implement on their own, and they're looking for somebody to help them to really hit a grand slam of solving this problem in a very in a big way. And so you're going to get that perspective as well. Who this is for? My ideal clients, my typical clients, are professional people who are creating and have created success in their life and stability in their life. I work with both people in the corporate world, and I've got some businessmen and entrepreneur clients, but I think this is kind of who I resonate with, who resonates with me, and frankly has the resources to pay for my service. And the people that I work with are generally looking to moderate. I'm all about quitting as well, if that's what someone wants, but sort of my unique twist on what I offer is an ability for some people to cut back and to moderate in a way that's comfortable, reliable, and natural. And so that's what's interesting for most of my clients. Who this is not for is for people who are in crisis in their life, where their drinking is like acutely wrecking their health, their finances, or having legal issues. This is really not the person that I'm best equipped to serve. People that define themselves as alcoholic maybe aren't going to get the most out of this. I don't use that word alcoholic. I don't find that it's very helpful. But if you are into thinking about alcohol that way, in the way that AA talks about alcohol and alcoholics, stick around, but warning, you may not like what I have to say. And finally, what I have to talk about here is not relevant for people who have to deal with physical addiction and who have to worry about managing withdrawal symptoms as part of their effort to cut back on their drinking. And finally, coming back to who this is for, a common thread that I've realized over the time that I'm doing this coaching thing is that for these professional, successful people, but who are drinking too much, there's something else going on, what I'm calling here the status quo. Something in their life that is really creating some angst that fuels the drinking. And so when I talk about the coaching solution, I just want to mention here that we address that. We try to find out what that is and see what the interaction is of that with drinking. So my work with clients is not purely drinking focused. It's more of a holistic life effort that addresses the status quo and what could be changed there to make life a lot better. All right, here we are. Time for the content. I've promised 3 steps. These 3 steps that I use in my process are plan, observe, and evaluate. And I'm going to teach you all 3. I'm going to start with observe, though, the second step, because it's the easiest to implement in the beginning. It's really the most important in the sense that it's the place where you collect the information that leads to the insight that leads to change. And it's the one that you could do tonight. Talk about autopilot. So when I talk about observe, this is really about turning off our autopilot with respect to drinking. When I talk about autopilot, I mean our ability to, for example, drive to work without having to pay much attention. That's a miraculous thing, that we can do a thing that at one point in our life was very difficult and challenging, and even now is objectively a complicated task. Driving a complicated piece of machinery at high speed on busy roads, we don't even have to think about it. So autopilot's a wonderful thing. Thank goodness our brain has that capability. But while in autopilot, one can't learn anything new, and it's not a basis for transformation. And what I assume that you're looking for is a new relationship with alcohol, a transformed relationship with alcohol, and you're not going to get there by continuing to be on autopilot. So what I'm going to talk about are ways to break out of that automatic mode of operating with respect to drinking. The first of these is to treat every single drink that you take as a decision, to acknowledge that there is a decision there, that you have the chance to say yes, you've got the chance to say no. And so this might be a 5-second pause before each drink. It could be a 5-minute pause if you're willing to give it that much time. But instead of just coming home and going to the liquor cabinet or going to the refrigerator because that's what you did yesterday and the day before without thinking about it, it's a matter of pausing before that action and say, hey, what do I want to do here? Am I going to do this, yes or no? And even if you're deciding yes, and even if you're deciding yes at points that you feel like you shouldn't, that you'd rather not, the perfect version of you in the future won't say yes to that, that's okay. By being decisive and starting to just take that pause and make that acknowledgement, it's going to start to make a difference in your drinking. The other things that I want you to pay attention to as part of this observe phase during your drinking are, we're going to go into that. So before you drink, before the first drink of the day or of the evening, I want you to do a check-in with yourself. How and what are you feeling? And when I talk about feeling, I'm talking about your emotional state. So you want to consider, are you feeling stressed, anxious, tired, frustrated, irritated, maybe happy, joyful, celebrated? What is it? Because there is a real tie-in between how we feel and what we do. I'm not saying that you drink because of these feelings, but by coming to understand your emotional state before you drink under and over different situations, you're going to learn some good stuff about yourself. It's also interesting to take a second. Why are you feeling that way? Is it because of work? Well, what about work? Is it coworkers? Is it the boss? Is it the job you have to do? Is it the output of the company? You know, why do you feel whatever it is you feel? Specifically with respect to feeling, I want you to check in with the urge. Are you experiencing an urge to drink? And most likely, you are. Any of us that are drinkers we have a drinking habit. That doesn't mean an addiction, but our body responds at certain times. Our brain and body knows when it's beer 30, and we get an urge. And so before you drink, I want you to start to sort of pay attention. Am I feeling an urge, and what does it feel like? And you may not have noticed this before, but this urge is going to be present in your body. There are some sensations that are actually the thing that's compelling you to want to get a drink. So check in with your belly. Do you have an empty feeling or a full feeling or a feeling like of butterflies? Or maybe in the pit right here in your solar plexus? Maybe the sensations are in your mouth, like a extra salivation, for example. That's a thing that happens to me when I have an urge. So before you're drinking, do a check-in with your state. What's going on with you? And for every drink, the first drink and the subsequent ones, why are you going to have it? Why do you want it? What do you want to get out of it? These kind of questions go together. Are you having it because it tastes good and you want to experience that taste? Are you, maybe your why is because it seems like the right thing to do in the social environment that you're in. You don't want people to judge you, or that you want to feel accepted or gracious as a host or as a guest. What do you want to get out of it? Again, I mentioned the taste. Maybe what you want to get is that buzz, that first kind of warm glow, that feeling of relaxation, that little turn down the volume of all those thoughts. And what will you actually get from it? And this is a really good thing to start to pay attention to. What do you want, and what really is likely to happen? You've been drinking long enough that you could probably make some predictions. And if not, as you start to do this observe process over the period of what you're going to actually get is different than what you want. That's kind of good information. And then that next question is, what are you giving up by having this drink? And the point of this is not to manipulate yourself into saying no. It's really to be curious, acknowledge the reality of what are you giving up. So like when I have my typical nightly cocktail, I don't feel like I'm giving anything up. And I've examined that. I know that I really feel exactly the same the next day. I don't drink often enough that I can say that with confidence. So I know that like my one drink, I'm not giving anything up. But with two, I am actually. I'm more likely to sort of fall asleep on the couch or at least get drowsy and not be able to read whatever book it is I'm reading. Or I'm going to be kind of less present and less engaged and less energetic to have a conversation with my wife. And for sure, if I were to face the prospect of a third drink, which I really never do, I'd be giving up some quality of the next morning because I would feel it a little bit. So yeah, what are you giving up with each drink? One of the things I want you to really pay attention to as you drink is to start to notice that each drink is different. We tend to view drinking as kind of like this homogeneous thing, and we probably have kind of the same label. It's all good, or I like it. That's what people say. That's what I used to say. But if you'll start to pay attention, you realize that what you get out of the first drink is kind of different than what you get out of the third. This is where these two start to really diverge. When it turns out you start thinking about, it may be different for each person, but your third or fourth drink, what do you want to get? You want to get that same nice feeling that you got from the first. But what are you going to really get? Usually not that. So start to see your drinking as a thing that is different with different drinks. And as you start to collect that information, instead of just having a story that, I just like it, maybe you'll start to say, I really like the first. I just like to have 2 drinks, but it could go so far as to, but I don't like having 4 drinks. I mean, this is where I am in my life, and this is what happens to many of my clients. So this is really an important thing to pay attention to. And I talked in the beginning about the feelings. Pay attention to your feeling state. And feelings are really important. If you're anything like me, you've been oblivious to most of your feelings for most of your life, disdainful of them, feel like they're not manly, they get in the way of rational behavior, but they're really important and they drive our actions. And in particular, if you think of the actions that you're doing that you don't want to be doing, they're being driven by an emotion. And so if you'll keep that awareness throughout this whole process and notice what you're feeling before you drink and how your emotional state changes as you drink, you're going to get some good insight, and you're going to start to those emotions are going to have less power to drive your actions in the unconscious way that they do now. All right, so that's the second step, observe. The 3 steps again are plan, observe, and evaluate. I'm going to talk a little bit about plan. And planning, that step really consists of deciding today what you're going to drink tomorrow. This is very different than making sort of a blanket statement, I'm not going to drink on weekdays, or I'm going to keep it to 2 on weekdays. You've probably tried that, and it doesn't work very well. But this kind of planning of deciding today what you're going to drink tomorrow, taking into account what you know about yourself and about the next day's situation, is a very different thing. And it contributes a few things. It gives you a couple things. One is it gives you resolve. When you're dealing with an arbitrary set of rules that your past self made up a week ago or a month ago, it's not much, the hell with that guy. You don't pay him that much attention. But you're a lot more likely to sort of give some value to the version of yourself that just yesterday said, man, 3 would be the right number for today. So this planning really helps you create constraints that you're able to live with. And as much as our eventual goal is for you to, the eventual goal is for you to be able to just kind of naturally say no, to naturally want to drink only an appropriate amount, there's going to be constraint required and resolve in the beginning or throughout parts of this process, and Drink Plan helps that. Second thing that it does is it provides a clear measure of success. And what I mean by this is I've talked with people who, would occasionally drink less. Let's say their norm was 4, and they, on a night would cut it back to 2. They would still manage to see that as a failure because I should have not had any. And if you do that to yourself, even when you manage yourself a little bit better and constrain yourself, and you still beat yourself up and say that you think of yourself as a failure, you're not going to get any momentum in the process. A process that's failure is important to any transformation process, but constant failure just makes you quit. So there's a good chance that you probably have a pretty negative view of yourself about drinking. Feel like you're a little bit out of control, probably don't have anything nice to yourself to say about drinking. And so you're used to looking at yourself through this lens, and you only see failure everywhere you look. But with planning, if you plan the number 3 and you stick to 3, then you've got an event you can celebrate, and you can claim success, and you'll perpetuate the process if you can do that. So clear success is very important. Clear failure is also important. So what I mean by that, let's say you planned 3, and then you had 4. Well, whatever happened between drinks 3 and 4 is pretty interesting. That's an important point on which you can focus these observation skills that we talked about from the other step. And that's probably where interesting things happen. What were you feeling after the third that drove you to have that fourth? What were some of the sentences in your brain? So if we leave it wide open and you're supposed to just be drinking less, okay, great. I'm suggesting that you pay attention to your entire drinking experience, but our attention is limited. But if you can really focus your attention on what's going on when you get to your threshold, when you get to your planned amount, you're going to collect some good information. For planning to work, it has to be progressive, realistic, so that you can get some wins under your belt. So if you're a person who's drinking consistently 3 or 4 a night, and you launch into planning, hey man, this sounds great. You say you start planning and you plan to drink 0 or 1, you're probably not going to succeed, at least not consistently. And so, but if instead, what I recommend my clients do is if they're drinking 4 a night, plan for 4 and get some wins, get some successes under their belt. And then over time, gradually bring the quantity down. And there's even a progressiveness to the planning, just the act of planning, because it's not an easy habit to implement. It may seem like it's easy. Okay, I'm going to start planning. Most people don't do it, and right off the bat perfectly. And so part of the progression is to become somebody who can consistently plan. So that's planning. And now I want to talk about the third process. We've got plan, observe, we already talked about, and evaluate. And evaluate is the process that I really don't think is present in other systems or other approaches to quitting or to cutting back. I think it's unique to my system, and it's very powerful. So firstly, for evaluation, what I mean by evaluate basically is what happened yesterday? What happened last week? And evaluation is what we do a lot of in coaching, is in our weekly discussions, look backwards and see what happened. For evaluation to be successful, for it to work, first thing you've got to do is bring to it an attitude of curiosity. You need to become an interested scientist of yourself, not a critical, judgmental person. And if you're anything like most of my clients, you're probably pretty good at judging yourself. You're pretty hard on yourself. And that just gets in the way. So evaluate is not look back at yourself yesterday and say, oh yeah, you screwed up again. It has to be, yeah, genuinely, what happened yesterday? So this attitude is very important. So here's the kind of things we look at in evaluation when we look back. Did you have a plan? And if not, why not? Did you forget? How can we overcome that? Maybe we put it on your calendar. Usually that's not the most common problem, or it's not the most difficult. Usually there's some resistance there. There's some emotion that got in the way of you actually creating a plan for yourself. And maybe it's empathy for your future self who you're going to constrain, and you start to feel that constraint even at the time that you write down the plan. Maybe in the beginning of doing planning, you're having to in order to plan realistically, you're writing down on a piece of paper, if you're doing it in writing, a pretty big number that embarrasses you, that you feel shame over. And so this question of why aren't you planning is really important, and you can start to learn something about your psychology, and you can start to then have to change how you want to deal with those emotions so that you take control of yourself instead of letting these emotions of discomfort control you. If you did have a plan, excellent. Was it written? I really recommend a written plan. And my clients always find that they do better keeping to a written plan than they do a mental plan. Was it clear? And here's an unclear plan is to say, I plan to have 2 or 3 drinks tomorrow. That is worse than no plan at all. Just trust me as the expert, it's worse. A clear plan is, I'm going to have 2 drinks tomorrow. I'm going to have 3 drinks tomorrow, but not 2 or 3. Clarity really makes a difference. And was it realistic? I already talked about that already. Then, did you meet your plan? If so, yeah, celebrate that. And, what was hard about it? What were the challenges? What can you reproduce? What can you take away from that success and repeat it the next day, the next week, and so on? But if you didn't keep to the plan, if you broke it, here's some of the questions to consider. With curiosity, not with judgment. When did you break it? Go back to my example of planning for 3. And so you had a plan for 3 and you had 4, you had 5. When did you make that decision to have that fourth? Was it at the moment after you'd had three and the possibility is there for the fourth? Or was it earlier? Maybe you made your plan the day before, but at 3 o'clock in the afternoon you said, screw it, I'm going to drink tonight. And you basically threw the plan out the window. So be realistic. When did you decide not to keep to your plan? Why did you not keep to it? What were you feeling? What was the emotion that was driving that decision? What was the one sentence that your inner drink salesman came up with that was so convincing? Start to sort of collect some information about what's going on when you decide not to keep to your plan. And then figure out what you can do differently next time. I mentioned this drink salesman. So he's got his sales pitch, and it's worked on you for years. But if you will really acknowledge, man, I keep making this decision that I don't want to make because of this line that I'm going to be better tomorrow, or I deserve it because it was a tough day, or whatever he says, you just say, I'm not going to fall for that bullshit anymore. I'm going to be ready to deal with that one sentence, and I'm just not going to engage with it in the same way. That's the kind of thing you can do to prepare yourself the next time. Just stick to your plan. So those are the 3 steps. What I want to talk about now is something that's really important if you really want to do more than experiment and dabble with this. And this is the foundation that really is necessary to be underneath to support that process of those 3 steps in order to really make change. And that foundation I'm going to refer to as intention, or you could substitute the word commitment. And so let me talk about this in comparison to running. I've become a runner. I'm in training for a triathlon, so I'm thinking about running a lot these days. So you probably know of people, if you're not one yourself, who could say, hey, I want to run a 5K race this weekend. And there's a lot of people that could just say that and they could go do it, even if they're not currently running. They may not be fast. They may not be able to run the whole way. They may be very sore the next day. But a lot of people could say, I want to run I want to run a 5K, and they could go do it. But I don't know very many people who aren't already accomplished runners who could say, hey, I want to run a marathon this weekend, and could just go out and do that. So you can want to run a 5K, but if you want to run a marathon, you got to make a commitment to do it. You have to have really a solid intention to commit to stick to a process that's going to help you become somebody who can run 26 miles. And so right now, maybe you're in the situation of wanting to drink less. And if you want to drink less, you can do these 3 steps and see what happens, and I think you'll get benefit from them. But if you really are ready to make a change in your life, at some point you're going to have to set an intention, just like the guy who runs a marathon. So what's different between an intention versus just wanting? An intention is clear. Back to the marathon example. If you're, say, I just want to be able to run real far, that's probably not going to get you to where you can run 26 miles. So you need a certain clarity, and like the ultimate clarity there would be to say, hey, I'm going to run the Tallahassee Marathon on November 12th, and I'd like to do it in 4 hours or less. I mean, that's a clear goal. I don't know that it's necessary or even possible to define your drinking goals with that clarity, but I hope you can see the difference. You need to understand and articulate a compelling why. And usually it's going to be a lot better to have one big reason than lots of little reasons. Though health is one that comes up. And health is a great reason to drink less and cut back. But I've talked to a lot of people who want to drink less to get healthy, and that on its own is not very compelling. So why do you want to be healthy? Maybe for you to be able to be a very active grandparent with your grandkids, or even with your kids, is a health-related reason that's more compelling. Maybe the why is just a matter of identity. I just don't want to be this person anymore. If you think, I don't want to be this person that feels out of control with alcohol, that might be enough. But you have to articulate a why that you feel in your bones. It's like, this matters and this is important. And finally, probably the biggest difference between intention and wanting is an acknowledgement of cost, of investment required. And in the case of the marathon, it may not be much money, a set of shoes and some running gear, maybe a coach, but you're going to have to pay the cost of a lot of runs, a lot of uncomfortable exercise in probably all different elements of heat and cold in order to get this thing or be able to do this thing you want. And the same applies to this this transformation around alcohol that you may be seeking. I know from my work with my clients, it's not as hard as running a marathon. I haven't run a marathon yet, so I'm not speaking from experience. But if you'll think of it in a similar way, you're going to be much further ahead. You're going to be much further to meeting your goal. So when it comes to cutting back on drinking, that process will get you there, but if you go into it acknowledging that you're going to have to experience some discomfort around constraint. You may have to experience some social discomfort as you show up differently in social situations than you have. You may have to, you could probably count on experiencing some discomfort around failure, because I see very few people that just in a linear way have perfect, graduated success after success. People usually have a setback that doesn't feel good. So some acknowledgement of cost is really important when thinking about setting a powerful intention. With that, I'm going to talk about coaching. I'm an expert in this. This is my process. I've taken many people through this, and it will get you the results that you want, the transformation that you want, that 50 to 75% reduction, but more importantly, get you to where alcohol is not important, it's not a big deal, and it's just natural to moderate. And coaching, hiring me to be your coach, is a tremendously powerful way to set an intention. One thing, there's a not small cost associated with it. So if all this kind of makes sense, you could see that this process could work for you, and you want to do more than dabble and experiment and try some things on a do-it-yourself basis, you want to find out what the solution looks like with me, then I encourage you to get on the phone with me. I offer a free consult call. There's a button down below this video on the website page that you can click where you fill out a short application and schedule a call. In that call, I'm going to find out where you're at with your drinking, where you want to be, kind of where you want to be in your life in general. And I'll describe how coaching can help you get there, talk about what the process would look like, and the discussion is going to be very much tailored to your situation. So you're going to come away from this call with a much more clear understanding of what's going on with you in your drinking situation. So that clarity is going to be important. And you're going to come away with a clear picture of how to change it. And obviously I'm going to describe that in terms of how I would do that, but I think you'll see that there's a step-by-step process there that kind of could apply independently of me if you really have the fortitude to do it on your own. And you're going to be inspired, because one of the things we'll talk about in that call is your compelling why. So it's an hour well spent. It really could be a pivotal moment in your journey towards solving this issue and getting what you want in your life. So I would love to talk with you. I want to thank you so much for your attention, for sticking with me here to the end, and I wish you a great day.